give you an overview of the Surgery Connect system. It is entirely developed by our team, so we don't resell anything. We're not using other people's technology. So that gives us the advantage that we can sort of react to customer feedback and about new features and different ways that you may work. So we do encourage customers to feed back to us should there be anything that you think new features wise. Most of our new features are based on customer feedback, and because it's a cloud-based system, any new features will just be added to your service. You don't have to upgrade or download or anything like that. It just gets automatically updated and ready for you to use. So yeah, please do feedback anything that comes to mind. So it's a cloud-based system. There's a couple of immediate things that potentially might be different for you. Do you ever get your patients calling in? Do they ever get an engaged tone if you're particularly busy? Okay, so that will never happen again. There's unlimited inbound calls, so there's because we're not using physical BT lines anymore. We're using a broadband connection. You can effectively have as many people call in, and everybody will always be greeted by "Welcome to Crouch Fall Surgery," and then they'll join the queue. So the queue, you've got only one reception group at the moment, which we set up yesterday. But we can expand that as and when, if you wanted to, in the future. But that will have a queue position announcement on it, so people will know what position in the queue they are. So if they're particularly high and it's not a particularly urgent call, then they can make that decision to call back later, so they don't have to wait 20 minutes and still not get anywhere. So there's also a something that's called a queue buster system, which is you may have experienced it on when calling other organisations. So at particularly busy times, you can set the system up so it says we're experiencing high volumes of calls. If you'd like to have a call back, then please press 1 now. And that will retain the position in the queue of that person, but they can end the call, and then our system will automatically call them back when they reach the front or when they near the front of the queue. Um, if that's something that you want to implement further down the line, then you can just by giving our support team a call. A lot of people do use it, and I mean, some of the statistics with regards to how much time it saves patients having to wait on the phone is over a month across all of our customers is quite astounding how much time it saves people. So it is something to remember that it is there and think about. The important thing for your reception staff is there's no change of behaviour as far as they're concerned. Everybody's just in the queue because they don't know whether people have queue busted or not. They're presented the calls in the same way and they answer them in the same way. So there's no real difference for your staff. It just helps out your patients. But there is no limit on outbound calls. Yeah, yeah. So effectively, there is no capacity limits anymore. So something that we touched on yesterday was mobility. So mobility in the sense that staff can move around the practice, but also it allows for working from home really easily. Do your staff move around the practice much? If, for example, a GP has to move room from what their normal room is, the way to contact that GP will not change depending on the room that they're in. So I mentioned yesterday that it was a user-based system. So if a GP has a short dial of 223, it doesn't matter which room that GP is in, it will always be 223 that you use to contact them. So it just cuts out the ambiguity or wondering who's in which room. And so the same is the case for anybody that perhaps sits at a different desk or whatever. You always contact those people in the same way, regardless of the desk that they're sitting at. And again, if anybody's working remotely, it's the same concept. So mobility is there. There's a free rein to move where you want, but you don't contact people in any different way, depending on where they are. Um, so probably something that you may not have at the moment is you're going to get a visibility of what's going on the phone system, so you can see how many active calls there are at the moment, how many people are queuing, how long they've been queuing for. We're not suggesting that you sit and stare at the console with this data on it. It's just, a quick check every now and again to just make sure that there's how many people are queuing. Is there anybody that's been queuing for a sort of a substantial amount of time? It also gives you a view of all of your staff, so who's active on the system, who's set to available, who's available to take calls. So it gives you a very quick view of what's going on at that given moment. Um, and finally, data analytics. We're logging lots of data as all of this is happening. And that allows us to give you some reports. We'll send you a monthly management report that will be sent at the beginning of each month for the previous month. That will have lots of graphs and data for you about staff, which staff have been making calls, when are we missing the most calls, what hours of the day are the busiest. So it just gives you a breakdown of sort of the key statistics for your practice. But there's also a suite of um, user-generated reports that I can show you later that allow you to sort of pick anything from a single day up to whatever period of time you want, and it gives you data for that period on various different things. So different people look into that in different extents, but all of the data is there available should you want it. So those are really the sort of four main key areas that's going to be potentially slightly different. And probably skip over this slide because we've really talked about this. But yes, this is just a slide to say that it's a user-based system. If people have any of these, they're contacted by any of these methods, so the 3-digit internal number, direct dial telephone number, or if they're part of your reception group, it will always be targeting a user, not a phone. So that's where we were talking about yesterday, where your reception staff could work from home as long as they're active on the system. They would still get the calls that are intended for them. And you have choices of devices that you can use. So you could use the desk phones that you've been wrestling with this morning to get set up. Yesterday, we added your personal mobile to your user, so that allows you to quickly switch to your mobile. And there's also the soft phone, which may or may not be an option for you. I mean, it's up to you, but that's we've got 3 kind of different devices. So overall, it doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter which device you're using, you will be contacted in exactly the same way in all of those scenarios. So, in general, the phones will be logged out like this. They'll have logged out on the screen, and it will have a login button. Because it's a user-based system, and all of the routing is based around your staff, users will need to log into the phone that they sit at when they start their working shift. Now, that can be done via 2 ways. First way is the more manual way, which is you press the login button on the phone and you use the up and down arrows to scroll to your name, and then you press OK. That's slightly more long-winded. What we want to get to is that we link it to the integration, the EMIS integration. So when you or when any of your staff sit at a PC and they log into EMIS, it will log them into the phone that they've just sat next to. So it's kind of linked to the EMIS login. That's part of the integration where it knows who's logging into EMIS. It knows which desk they've sat at, so it just logs them into the phone that they've just sat next to. But until you get that configured for day one, you're probably going to have to ask your staff just to press the login button and pick their name from a list, just until I think your engineer will get the integration up and running for you. But just for the first day or so, they'll have to do that. When you're logged into the phone, you'll know that you're logged in because your name will appear, and you'll get a few more buttons. So we've got a Go DND button. DND stands for Do Not Disturb. I don't know whether you have that functionality on your current system. Um, it's some people are a bit more skeptical about it than others, because they're concerned that their staff might just press that button and in a way to stop calls coming through to them. So it's up to you how you feel about it. But I mean, the benefits it has is if, for example, in reception, if at the busy times, if you've got multiple phones in there and someone goes away from their desk and they're not going to answer that phone, then it's just going to be ringing in the background, and it's just annoying for people that are actually
Yeah.
taking calls. So if they just hit Go DND when they're popping away from their desk, it means that that phone will just be quiet for a moment. And then they can just hit that button again when they come back. And likewise, GPs, if they're doing consultations and they don't want to be disturbed, then they can just hit that Do Not Disturb button. Um, Other than that, the log out button is equally as important as the logging in. So again, it just removes the user from that phone. It means that it's ready for somebody else to use should they need to. Again, it stops the phone from ringing, and also it tells people that you've finished your shift for the day. They can see that you're no longer available. So yeah, people need to get into the habit of logging out at the end of the day. Um, so I will just mention this. I'll go through it with the reception team, but in the reception team, should somebody have gone away from their desk and their phone is ringing, there is a group pickup button. Um, you pick up the phone, handset, and then it will present you with the group pickup option from there. So if one of the reception team leaves their desk and there's a telephone call targeting that phone, somebody else within the reception team can pick up their phone and press that group pickup button, and that will pick up the phone for them. And that's on. I've got both types of phone. I've got the bigger phone and the smaller phone, so it's exactly the same on either one. So there is the group pickup option. Um, all calls are recorded for 3 years. That's internal and external calls, inbound and outbound. So all by default, all calls will be recorded. But if anybody is speaking to a patient who requests that they don't want the call recorded, then there is a PREC button on the phone itself. When you press that PREC, well, that stands for pause recording. You will get both sides of the call will get an announcement to say the call recording has been paused, so the patient will hear it, and also the person on the phone will hear it, and that will pause that recording from that point. You can reactivate it again by pressing the button again, so it's a kind of an on-off toggle that you can toggle as many times as you want. So, I mean, I don't know whether you do, but some practices take credit card details for and things like that. So if you're in that part, you can just press the pause recording when you're taking the details, and then bring the pause recording back again, and it just gives the patient a bit of reassurance that you're taking their data seriously. So and of course, patients can, under GDPR, request that calls are not recorded. They're fully within their right to be able to request that. So when you're in a call, you'll always have that PREC button available to you, which will just pause the recording. And again, that's the same on the bigger phones as it is the smaller phones. Hold and transfer is a really difficult one to present on screen because it's all about different button presses. But on the smaller phones, you'll have a hold button, and it will tell you when they're on hold. And then you'll have a transfer button on the actual phone itself. Now, the transfer, remember, will always be to an individual person. So you'll be transferring to an individual person as opposed to, or you can transfer to a group of people. So if anybody wanted to transfer to reception, we set up that short dial for reception yesterday, so people can use that to transfer to. Um, you can then, once you attempt the transfer, you can then either resume the call, bring the caller back to you if there's nobody available, or you can complete the transfer by pressing the transfer button again. It's really difficult to show in pictures because it's kind of a real life thing that it works best with. I will
Yeah.
encourage your any staff that has the training later just to give it a go. So these phones you can actually pick up and make an outbound call on now. So you can make a call to your mobile and then have a practice of transferring that to one of their colleagues, because that effect you can transfer an outbound call as well as an inbound call. So it's something that you just need to do a couple of times, and then you'll get the hang of it, with regards to what the button presses are. But it's all on screen, so it's fairly straightforward. Um, I will come and again, the same on the bigger phones, which I think you've got, but the only difference is the hold and transfer buttons are on the handset itself. So again, that's just something to, familiarize yourself with. Do you ever have the need to bring in a third party into a three-way conversation? So on the smaller phones, which I guess the GPs will be having, when you're in a call, well, that's when you've got your pause recording. There's an additional button that says "More" on there. When you click that "More" button, um, there'll be a conf button that appears. So you hit that conf button, you dial the third party service that you want to contact. When they answer, you just hit that conf button again, and then all three legs of the call are joined together into one. And then at the end of the call, if if your staff member wants to continue to talk to the patient, then you just ask the third party to hang up the call, and then you'll still remain attached to the patient. So you can go to a three-way call and then sort of ask the third party to leave, and then you can go back to your single-way call. Um, so that's on the smaller phones. It's actually on the screen where you have to press more and then you get the conf button. On the larger phones, you've got a conf button on the phone itself. So that exactly the same process. You've just got a conf button on there. Um, Other than that, it's fairly standard functionality. You've got a redial button, which I think is RD on the phones. You've got a speaker should you need a speaker. You've got a mute button if you don't want the person to hear what you're saying. One of these is for the bigger phones, and one of them is for the smaller phones. It's just a very quick flashcard just to be put next to each phone. Uh, Probably the only part that most people will need is the transfer part that is down the bottom here. It just tells you the key presses to go through in order to send those to you after the session. Um, okay, so we did have a look at this yesterday. Above and beyond the standard phone system, there is this access to the user console. Um, Now, everybody has access to this at their own particular level. So you and quite a few others were supervisors, which means you get the highest level access. But it's open to everybody to log into this, and it's not mandatory. You don't have to log into it, but there's lots of things that it does for you that will help people. So it's kind of we leave it kind of on a practice to practice basis if you want us to talk about it with the other staff. But I'll go through what it allows you to see, and you can sort of ask questions and let me know what you think towards the end. So um, what it will do is first of all show you the live calls. So this is what I mentioned. All of these different coloured calls are live calls that are going on now. If they're green, they're inbound. If they're blue, they're outbound. If they're red, they're queuing. So if you see lots of red on this screen, you know that there's lots of queuing calls, and it will tell you how long each call has been queuing for. Um, so that's where, for yourself, you get an instant view of how many people are queuing to speak to your team. Also, this call list allows you to, as soon as a call is finished, the call recording is available to you. So each call that was connected has a little play button next to it. And that's just how you access the call recording. It's as simple as just clicking the play button. Um, so that's the first element that it might help with your staff. Anybody who's a manager level user has access to all of the call recordings. If you're a standard level user, you only get access to your own call recordings. But even in that sense, it can be useful to your staff to have that if they took a call and noted down a telephone number wrong, or they took some details down incorrectly, or it was a GP that just wanted to remind themselves of what this patient last time they phoned them. Then they can access those call recordings. They've been a part of. So that's the first sort of reason that you might want to allow your other staff to log in, but they will only get to see their own call recordings. Um, the second part that is quite a useful feature is because it's a user-based system, all of your staff will be listed on the right-hand side here. And they'll be grouped into your group, so you have your reception group in there. Um, but each staff member that's shown there, you can tell whether they're active on the system or not. So if they're dark grey, that means that they're not active on the system, they're not available, they can't receive a call, they're probably not working today, or they've gone out for lunch or whatever. Um, if they're light grey, that means that they are available to take a call. So yeah, if you wanted to speak to somebody, you could just ascertain whether they were light grey or not. Um, and if they were orange, as this person down the bottom here is, that means that they've gone into do not disturb. So if we go back to what we were talking about, logging onto the phone. So when somebody sits down at a desk in the morning, they'll either manually log onto the phone, or the integration will do it for them. As soon as that happens, that person's name will turn light grey on this console. So you can see that they're sat at a desk, they're active, they're ready to take calls. If someone presses do not disturb on their phone, then that person will turn orange in this console. So it gives you a full view of the availability of your staff. Now, you can use that as a management tool to say, hold on, I expect this person to be logged in and active and taking calls, but they're not, or that person's been on do not disturb for half an hour. Why have they gone in? Why have they done that for half an hour? Um, so you can use it in that sense. Or if you want to speak to somebody, you're not guessing whether they're available. You're not guessing whether they're logged into the system. You can actually see whether they're logged in. So you, rather than blindly making a call, you've got the ability to see who's available at any given moment. So that's the part of the visibility part of it that it helps with. So those are the sort of two first features around this console that will help. Um, if I go to the training console. So this is a training service of a user console, and I'm at a manager level. So as I said, accessing the call recordings, you can just do so by clicking on the left-hand side there, and that will just load up a new window, and then you'll get the audio through your speakers. Only managers get the option to download and delete the call recordings, so standard users can't download and delete their recordings. So you're not going to have staff members, if they do access it, they're not going to be deleting the calls they don't want people to hear. Um, so um, the other things that it will allow, if any of your staff are working remotely, um, then they would have to use this console. As I said, the console in practice is it's not mandatory; it's just an additional tool. But if you are working remotely, you have to use this. The reason you have to use it is because you need to tell the system what device you're going to be active on. So if I was working at home on my mobile, I would have to actually tell the system that I'm on my mobile. And I do that by clicking my initials in the top right, and then I go to my mobile. So because there's no physical phone to log into on the desk, I'm working remotely. I want to use my mobile. I have to tell the system that I'm on my mobile. Um, but other than that, I'm logged in as Ian Chesterton at the moment, so you can see that I'm dark grey. So I'm not actually. People know that I'm not logged onto the system. So if I click my initials and I go available, um, and then close it. Now you can see Ian Chesterton's turned light grey, so everybody knows that I'm available. If I want to step away from my desk or make a cup of tea, I go to do not disturb, and everybody see. So if I'm working in the practice or if I'm working at home, I can still let people know when I'm available. I can still sort of have a break and go into do not disturb. So, that's again, that mobility side of things, even if you're working away from the practice, you can still let people know, that you're available. Um, and we mentioned this, for you yesterday because you were part of the reception team and you potentially wanted to step in and step out, to
Yeah.
answer calls. If there's anybody else like that, then you can, do the same. You can have your reception group up here. They can just click on the ones when they want to take the calls or untick them. So it allows for a bit of management, especially when you're working remotely. You can still be a part of the phone system. Um, so not only can you see who's available, on this, list of staff down the right-hand side, if you wanted to, contact them, so if I wanted to speak to Yasmin, I could dial 212 because there's 212 next to her name, and that's her short dial, so I can dial, or I can just click on her name and I can call her. So you've got click to call functionality from this user list, so it speeds up that, contact because I need to know whether she's available. I can see that she is available, so I can just in a couple of clicks of a mouse, I can give her a call, and it's all about not taking your eyes away from the PC. You're working on the PC, so you might as well continue making calls from the PC. If I wanted to speak to somebody in the appointments team, in your case, it would be the receptions team. I could click this little blue number next to the appointments team, and I could click call, and that would make a call to the appointments team, and it would filter around those people. So, and again, that works whether you're in the practice or whether you're at home. So, if I'm a GP at home and I want to speak to the appointments team, I don't have to ring the main practice number and wait in the queue. I can just access this console, click on that, click call, and then the system will make a call for that GP into the appointments team, and then he or she will get through to them much quicker. So the members of the appointments team are again users, so they have the option to be active on whatever device that they want to be active on, but generally they'll be on the desk phones in the practice. So it will just come through just like any other call, except the person who's working remotely would have initiated that call through
Right.
the console, and that because obviously if they were on their mobile and they dialed 301, it wouldn't come through to the appointments team because it wouldn't know that that's the case. So you use the console to initiate the call either to an individual person just by clicking an individual or to a group of people just by clicking on the group. So I'm just going to make a call as Ian Chesterton to my mobile. Uh, it will be their initials will change color.
Okay.
So, again, blue calls are outbound, green calls are inbound, so their initials will show whether they're on a call or not.
Okay.
So you've kind of got 2 things to look at. One is the color denoting that they're available, and then are their initials showing that whether they're in a call or not in a call. So you can see, each individual person, whether they're available and or in a call. So, So yeah, that's sort of where you're making an informed decision as to whether to make that call or not. Um, so that's your internal list, and that's again another reason why you might want to allow your staff to use it. It's using the PC, we're kind of trying to bring telephony into the modern day by everything's controlled via the PC, so you don't necessarily even have to touch the telephone. If you've got a headset on, if you're on reception, you've got a headset on, you don't even need to touch the phone because you can do everything via this console. So
Yeah.
another feature that it has is got a phone book involved. So much like on your personal mobile phone, you'll have lots of contacts added to your personal mobile, and when you want to contact someone, you search those contacts and then you search by name. So if I go into so you can add things like hospitals into here. You can add suppliers. You can add any IT things that you have to phone, and it just means that you don't have to have a paper copy of, all of your contacts. You don't have to have a spreadsheet that you circulate and have to keep updating. It's a centrally, populated phone book, so when you add it centrally, it adds for everybody, that uses the system, so everybody's always using the most up-to-date number. So I've just searched for hospital there. We've only got one in here, but, I imagine you could have as many as you want. You could even have, say, if St Mary's had different departments, you could then add contacts for each of those different departments within it. So when you search for St Mary's, you get a list of all of the departments, um, and then when you, so again, it's click to call. So I found St Mary's, I click on it and I call it. So you don't need to remember what the number is. You just click to call from this console. And again, it helps in the practice and it helps at home because the likelihood is if somebody's working at home, they're not going to have access to their contact, whatever. But again, trying to get rid of all of those paper lists of numbers and whatnot, you've got a full phone book built into this system, and you just access it by clicking to internal and then external, just like that. So, and you can bulk upload as well. So if you've got already have a spreadsheet of your contacts, you can take that spreadsheet and you can bulk upload those contacts into the system. And once they're in, they're in. Um, Anyone can search on them, anyone can click to call them. If a number changes, you update it centrally and it updates for everybody. So it just takes out that sort of old fashioned way of doing things.
Yeah.
Um, Okay, so that is sort of the day-to-day user console. Once you get all of the receptionists and the phones and what, like I say, the engineer will help you with that. Um, when those PCs and staff members are all integrated, then when a patient call comes in, they'll start to receive a pop-up on their PC. It's not as big as this. I've just enlarged it so you can see, but it's sort of a smallish square in the bottom there, big enough so you can read it. Um, so what we would have done when that call originally came into your practice, we would have started searching EMIS for that telephone number. And we would bring back any patients that match that telephone number. So in this instance, we've matched 2 patients. Um, we do present the pop-up with the dates of birth of those patients, so people answering can still do their due diligence and make sure that they know who they are speaking to. They get them to confirm their date of birth. But when they have confirmed who it is, instead of manually searching in EMIS, which is press the F5 key and then type the surname or whatever, you just click on one of these names, and then that will open up the patient record in EMIS for you. So it cuts out all of those instances where you've got a difficult surname to spell, or it's Mr. Smith rings in and you've got 50 Mr. Smiths on your system and trying to figure out the one it is. It just, again, change of behavior. But when people realize, actually, I don't even need to search, most of the time, I don't need to search EMIS. I just, can I take your date of birth and then click on the name and then it opens it up for you. Um, so additional information on here, it will also tell you how long that person's been queuing for, because we do know that patients can have a habit of exaggerating slightly. So yeah, you can always apologize if it has been a while, but you can also correct them if they exaggerate how long that they've been queuing for. And then finally, it also tells you when that telephone number was last communicating with the practice. So how long ago it was and which staff member actually had that conversation. So on the outbound side of things, anybody that's making calls to patients can again do so via their PC. So much like we've talked about internal calling when you click to call your colleagues, or external calling where you click to call your hospitals from the list, you can also do click to call from for the patients as well. So if you wanted to use the keyboard when you're looking at a patient in EMIS, you've got a patient record open, you can press Control Shift and H, and that will dial their home number. If you press Control Shift and M, that will dial their mobile number. the other way of doing it is using your mouse. There'll be a new Surgery Connect icon, and we'll probably get to this if we can get you set up for your configuration. There'll be a new Surgery Connect icon on the toolbar, and that's kind of designed just to stay there in the background. So in the background, that will always be updating to the latest patient that you're looking at. So if you move patients, then in the background, that window will be updating. So, and then when you decide that you want to make a call to that patient, you click on the icon at the bottom. It will bring up this window, and it will have the patient details, and then you can just click to call on the number that you want. So you can either make a call to a patient using a keyboard, or two clicks of a mouse, and you've made a call to the patient. So again, it's all about not taking your focus away from the screen. You it's surprising if you're dialing lots of patient numbers. It's surprising how long it takes to sort of look at the screen, type in the number on your phone. You might get it's wrong. It's just yeah, it just allows you to cut that out. And when people get used to it, two clicks of a mouse, you've started that call to that patient. And again, this also has the SMS functionality built in. So
Yeah.
this is an option within the integration, and it's again one of those things that is for you to decide how it best operates. But after every call, you can get the option to associate that call recording to the patient that you're looking at in EMIS. It doesn't physically put the audio file into EMIS because there's clearly not enough room in EMIS storage-wise to receive them. But what it does is it creates a link between that call recording and that specific patient. Um, so should you then, if you associate multiple calls to that patient, when you're viewing that patient in EMIS, on this little tab here that I showed you where you initiate the call, you've got a
Yeah.
call log there. You click that call log, it would show you all of the calls that have been associated to that patient. It's the reason I said it's for you to decide how it operates is that a lot of our customers turn that setting off for the receptionist because they're receiving a hell of a lot of calls. A lot of them are just going to be general query calls or things like that, and they get a little bit fed up of having to press no after every call. And a lot of people just really use it for clinical calls, so outbound GP calls, because it was really intended that it sort of gives you an enhanced clinical record. So adding to the written notes or the typed notes that you might put on the patient record, you've also got a log of the call recordings that patient has had. If a patient is being handled by a different clinician, then they can have a quick listen to the previous call recording that happened. And so it's I think it works best more for just clinical calls where there is advice given or consultations happening. But it is a setting that you can set for individual staff level, so you can turn it off for individual staff and you can turn it on for individual staff. So it's one of those ones where you have to decide how it works best. And like I say, most people turn it off for receptionists and turn it
Yeah.
on for GPs.
Okay.
Um, And again, I mean, this is all very flexible, so don't think that you have to stumble upon the perfect setup from day one and everything works exactly how everything works perfectly. Very few people have the settings or the flows from day one, going on to after a few weeks that it's sort of slightly different anyway. So it's all flexible and it can all be changed. So if you're navigating around the system, you do it from these three lines at the top here. So
Okay.
you click on that and then go to configuration console. That's what allows you to set more configuration options. Um, so within the users section, there's all of your users. If anybody wants to have the option to use their uh, mobile, so you click into the user and then you go to the numbers tab. and then that's where I put your mobile number in against you. So if anybody else wants to make use of using their mobile, then it's just a case of coming to the configuration, clicking on users, um, selecting the user that you want, and then just adding that mobile, and then that will mean that that option will be available to that person. The report console that I mentioned is another option available from that. So I clicked the three menus again and just went to reports. Um, the calls are generally organized where you've got the inbound telephone numbers here. Um, so if I probably won't be any data, but we'll just have a look. Um, yeah, there isn't any data. Um, so when you have data, it's just a question of picking a report, and you can specify the time period that you want to run that report for. You can even pick a custom range if you wanted to just look at a couple of days. You can just pick a couple of days, and then if you generate it, it will give you all of the data that you want. Probably the only one that does have data is this user calls queue, which I'll just generate so you can see. There's not much in there, but that's just those out. Someone's been making outbound calls. You can see here that it's just logged as outbound calls, and that's because nobody was logged in on the phone that was making those calls. So if people don't log in on the phone, then we'll still record the calls. The calls will still be made, but they'll be logged as outbound calls, which means that they're still there. It just means that you can't search them as well. If you want to search a call recording, or if you want to have a look at who's making calls, you won't be able to ascertain who that was making it, because it will just be logged under a generic user. So that's why we need to get people to log in. Okay, and I think one final thing is the support portal as well, available from the three lines. Oops. You can, of course, phone us on the phone number, but there's also the ability to um, uh, log a ticket just via this console. It allows you to upload images against it. You can add comments to your pre-existing tickets. You can monitor them and see what's been going on. You click those three lines, and then
Take
go service delivery console. Um, we recognize that there's quite a few consoles, and we're trying to amalgamate them and make them a bit more sort of not so many options. But the service delivery console, in the users section, you can just add a new user. So when a new staff member comes on, you just click that button there and give them a name and an email address. Yeah, exactly. It's best to try and just to keep things tidy, because
yeah,
anybody that's named on the system will appear in this list of staff.
yeah,
So, in order to keep it tidy, if somebody leaves, you can either edit them if you've got somebody else replacing them. So you can just click the blue icon and edit them, or you can just delete them and then create a new user when you want to. You're not restricted on users. You can have as many as you want. So something that some people do is create locum users. Yeah, so you can either add them as a user by name if you wanted to, but sometimes if they're coming and going quite regularly, that can be sort of you'll find yourself adding and editing users all of the time. So quite often people just create generic locum users,
yeah,
and then give those details to the locums. And instead of at least then the calls will be logged against that if they're making calls, they'll be logged against a locum user, so it makes them easier to find. Um, and then they can get access to the console if they want to. So yeah, having some generic locum users or medical students, that's fine. Just add them in as and when you need to. So if you create them a login, um, they would then get access to this console, which would allow them to click their mobile, as you have here, and then I can't show you. Then they'll have a keypad here where they can dial their numbers from the system, and that will mean that they're still using their mobile, but they're not initiating the call from their mobile. They're initiating the call from this console, and all calls will be logged and all calls will be recorded. And if you name them on the system, then they'll be logged under those names, so you've got a record of the calls that they're making for you. So I would say that that was probably a sensible step